Mary Wilson sat in her home in Los Angeles in the year 2000, staring at a contract that represented the ultimate insult. The Return to Love tour was being planned, venues were on hold, promoters were salivating, and the plan was to launch a massive reunion, the first time Diana, Mary, and the Supremes would officially tour together since that final curtain in 1969. But Mary wasn't signing. She put the pen down, she walked away. And the reunion album that was rumored to accompany the tour, the music that would have finally healed 3 decades of wounds, died on a lawyer's desk before a single note was sung. Some of y'all remember the electric anticipation when the Return to Love tour was first whispered about in late 1999. The idea of Diana Ross finally standing shoulder to shoulder with Mary Wilson and Cindy Birdsong again. Finally, after 30 years of solo careers and tell-all books, the women who defined the sound of young America would harmonize once more. Finally, fans would get the closure they had been begging for since the day Diana walked away in Las Vegas. Finally, the legacy would be honored properly. But the Return to Love negotiations were doomed from the start. The promoters, SFX, had made a fatal miscalculation. They assumed Mary Wilson and Cindy Birdsong were just backup singers who would be grateful for the work. They didn't understand that Mary was the keeper of the flame, the woman who had fought for the Supremes' identity for decades. They offered Diana Ross a reported $15 million. They offered Mary Wilson barely $2 million. And when you tell a woman who built the foundation that she is worth less than 15% of the star who left, you aren't negotiating, you starting a war. The recording sessions that were whispered about, the secret plan to get the ladies into a studio to cut a live album or a few new commemorative tracks, never happened. Not because the voices didn't blend, but because the respect wasn't there. The contract stipulated that this was a Diana Ross tour featuring the Supremes, not a Supremes reunion. And Mary Wilson, with all her pride and history, refused to be a footnote in her own story. The details of the negotiation became public and ugly, but the result is the same. No reunion, no new recordings, no artistic legacy from the 2000 attempt. What makes this devastating isn't just that a contract wasn't signed. It's that this was the last realistic chance for the original members to create together. Mary Wilson died in 2021. Florence Ballard died in 1976. The window for the Supremes to exist as a unit of equals closed in that negotiation room in 2000 and never reopened. And every offer that came after was poisoned by the memory of how this deal went down. Somewhere in the files of SFX and Motown are likely memos outlining what that show could have been. Set lists that included deep cuts, concepts for a new live album, maybe even demos of arrangements prepared for a trio that never arrived. Either way, the album that should exist, the live document of Diana and Mary finding their harmony again, doesn't exist and never will. Some of y'all understand the pain of knowing your worth when the world tries to discount it, of walking away from a paycheck because the cost to your dignity is too high, of relationships that shatter not because of what was said, but because of how things were valued. The missing Supremes reunion isn't just about money, it's about recognition. It's about the lost chance for the women to stand as equals. Berry Gordy always claimed he wanted the girls back together, always positioned himself as the benevolent father figure. And that positioning was clever because it distracted everyone from the fact that he created the hierarchy in the first place. He created the Diana Ross and the Supremes dynamic that made an equal reunion financially impossible in the promoters' eyes. Diana spent the negotiation period silent. She wanted the tour, but she wasn't willing to cut her fee to bring Mary up to parity. She wasn't willing to use her leverage to demand equal treatment. And underneath the silence was a fundamental truth. Diana saw herself as a solo superstar doing a favor. Mary saw herself as a founding member demanding respect. Those two realities could not exist on the same stage. But what exactly happened when the tour actually launched without Mary? Why did the reunion implode so spectacularly? And what lesson did the industry learn the hard way? The Return to Love tour was officially announced in April 2000, but the press conference was awkward. Instead of Mary Wilson and Cindy Birdsong standing next to Diana, it was Sherry Payne and Linda Lawrence, talented women who had joined the Supremes in the 1970s, long after Diana had left. The media immediately branded it a fake reunion. The promoters tried to spin it. They claimed it was a celebration of the music, not just the original members, but the public wasn't buying it. Tensions emerged immediately, but not in the rehearsal room, in the media. Mary Wilson went on Larry King Live. She went on 2020. She told the world exactly what she had been offered and why she turned it down. She controlled the narrative before the first ticket could be sold. Diana, meanwhile, was rehearsing with Sherry and Linda, trying to recreate a chemistry that hadn't existed for 30 years because these women had never actually performed with her. The magic was missing before the curtain even went up. Some of y'all remember the headlines from that summer. Stop in the Name of Greed, Diana Ross and the Replacements. The excitement about a reunion curdled into a joke about Diana touring with backup singers she barely knew. The narrative shifted from a celebration of Motown history to a public airing of dirty laundry. And the fans, who had waited decades to see the Supremes, felt cheated. They didn't want a Supreme, they wanted the Supremes. The financial fallout revealed the depth of the mistake. Without Mary and Cindy, the promoters couldn't charge the premium prices they wanted, but they tried anyway. Venues that should have been sold out were half empty. Scalpers couldn't give tickets away. The demand for a Diana Ross solo show with guests simply wasn't there. Diana was performing her heart out, but she was performing to rows of empty blue seats. Recording sessions for a live album were allegedly planned, but the performances felt hollow. Sherry and Linda were fantastic singers, but they weren't the women who had walked through the fire with Diana. The harmonies were technically perfect, but emotionally empty. There was no history in the look, no shared trauma in the eyes, and you can't record history if it isn't in the room. Berry Gordy tried to stay above the fray, but even he couldn't fix the optics. Seeing Diana on stage singing Baby Love with two women who weren't there when it was recorded just reminded everyone of who was missing. Reminded everyone that Mary was sitting at home and Florence was in the grave. The show felt like a cover band fronted by the original lead singer. The tour launched in Philadelphia in June 2000, and it was a disaster from the box office perspective. By early July, the numbers were coming in and they were catastrophic. The promoters were losing millions. The overhead for the massive stage production couldn't be covered by the dismal ticket sales. The magic wasn't happening. The electricity was gone. By the time the tour reached mid-summer, it was over. In a humiliating turn of events, the entire tour was canceled, not postponed, canceled. Diana issued a statement blaming the promoters. Mary issued a statement saying she felt vindicated. Cherie and Linda found themselves unemployed, and the reunion that was supposed to be the victory lap became a cautionary tale about hubris. The recordings that might have come from this era were buried. Nobody wanted to release a souvenir of a failure. The footage filmed for a potential DVD was locked away. The material sits in vaults, a testament to a bad idea executed poorly. Some of y'all understand how businesses fall apart when you ignore the core product. The core product of the Supremes wasn't just the songs, it was the relationship, it was the trio. The Return to Love tour failed because it tried to sell the brand without the soul. It tried to bypass the hard work of reconciliation and go straight to the cash register. And the fans, to their credit, refused to pay for a lie. The aftermath was predictable but tragic. Diana went back to a solo isolation, bruised by the rejection. Mary continued her solo touring, emboldened by the public support. But the bridge was burned. If there had been a 1% chance of a real reunion before 2000, it was 0% afterwards. The public fight over money and status cemented the wall between them, and we were left wondering what could have been if the offer had been fair and the women had been together. The 2000 reunion wasn't the first attempt that failed to produce recordings. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, there were periodic discussions about Supreme's reunion albums. Motown would approach Diana, Mary, and sometimes surviving members. Initial enthusiasm would give way to negotiations that fell apart over creative control, money, billing, and all the issues that had divided them originally. In 1983, after the Motown 25 performance where Diana pushed Mary, there was talk of capitalizing on the publicity. Berry Gordy supported it. Motown's publicity machine promoted it, but Diana quickly shut it down, saying she was focused on her solo career. The moment that could have led to reunion instead deepened the rift. The 1988 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction was another opportunity. Diana, Mary, and Cindy Birdsong appeared together, performed briefly. The chemistry seemed genuine for those few moments, but again, nothing materialized. Diana and Mary went back to their separate careers and separate narratives about Supreme's history. Some of y'all remember each time reunion was discussed. Each time hope built that maybe this time it would happen. And each time disappointment when negotiations failed. The pattern repeated so often that by 2000, the cynicism was justified. People bought tickets to return to love expecting disaster, and disaster is what they got. What makes the missing recordings particularly painful is that the Supremes' recorded legacy essentially ended in 1969. Everything after Diana left was Supremes without Diana, different sound, different dynamic, and everything with Diana was solo Diana incorporating Supremes material. The possibility of mature, reunited Supremes creating new art reflecting on their journey never happened. Imagine if the Beatles had reunited in the 1990s. Imagine if Simon and Garfunkel had made a new album. Imagine if Fleetwood Mac's reunions had produced sustained new creative work. Those reunions happened with varying degrees of success. The Supremes never got that chance. Or they got the chance and couldn't take it because the wounds were too deep. Florence Ballard's absence haunted every reunion attempt. Florence died in 1976, poor and broken. Florence's story was a cautionary tale about what Motown did to artists who didn't comply. Every reunion discussion implicitly raised the question, are we celebrating the Supremes or ignoring how Florence was destroyed? Diana wanted to focus on celebrating. Mary felt Florence's story had to be acknowledged. Berry Gordy's role in preventing the reunion was subtle but significant. Berry had built a system that required competition, had elevated Diana by diminishing others, had created dynamic where Diana's success required Mary's subordination. And Berry never dismantled that system, never addressed how it poisoned relationships. The recordings that might exist in Motown vaults are probably incomplete, rough, probably include takes where Diana and Mary's voices don't blend, probably include false starts, arguments caught on tape, moments where the professional facade cracks and the real anger shows. Not the kind of material Motown wants released, not the kind of legacy Diana wants preserved. Some of y'all have worked situations where bringing former colleagues together was more trouble than benefit, where history prevented present collaboration. The Supremes' reunion attempts failed for all those reasons. The women couldn't separate past from present, couldn't forgive enough to create together, couldn't find common ground that honored everyone's truth. Diana Ross is 80 years old now. Mary Wilson died in February 2021 at age 76. The possibility of Supreme's reunion died with Mary. Whatever recordings might exist in vaults will stay there. Whatever songs Diana, Mary, and others could have created together will remain uncreated. The reunion album that should have been the Supremes' final artistic statement will never exist. Mary's death hit differently than Florence's. Florence died in 1976, when reunion still seemed possible someday. Florence's death was tragedy, but didn't foreclose the future. Mary's death in 2021 closed the book, ended all possibility, made clear that Diana and Mary's unresolved issues would stay unresolved, that the art they could have made together was permanently lost. Some of y'all felt that loss when Mary died, felt the weight of opportunities missed, felt sadness that these women who'd created so much joy together couldn't find way to reconcile, felt anger at systems and personalities that prevented reunion, felt grief for the album that should have been their goodbye to fans who'd loved them for 60 years. Diana's response to Mary's death was a carefully worded statement expressing sadness and acknowledging their shared history. Not the heartfelt tribute some hoped for, not the admission that Diana regretted how things ended, not the recognition that Diana's choices had contributed to their inability to reunite meaningfully. Just professional acknowledgement from one former colleague about another's passing. The legacy of the missing reunion album is silence where music should be, gap in the discography where closure should exist, absence where reconciliation could have been documented. The Supreme story ends without a proper ending, ends with women who created magic together dying without resolving what made them unable to create together anymore. For younger generations discovering Supreme's music, the missing reunion album means incomplete picture, means understanding the group through their 1960s recordings and separate solo work rather than through mature perspective reflecting on their journey. Berry Gordy is 95 years old now. They rebuilt Motown into empire, partly through the Supreme's success. Berry could have used his power to facilitate genuine reunion. Instead, Berry protected the system that had enriched him, let opportunities for reunion pass because reunion wasn't necessary for Berry's legacy. The recordings that might exist are owned by various entities with conflicting interests, and frankly, releasing incomplete, tension-filled material might damage legacies rather than enhance them. Sometimes silence is better than exposing just how bad things were. Some of y'all understand that not all stories get happy endings. The missing Supremes reunion album joins a long list of lost possibilities in music history, but it stings particularly because we know exactly why it didn't happen. Know that with more grace, more forgiveness, it could have happened. Diana's choice to prioritize solo legacy over Supreme's reunion was Diana's right, but that choice came with a cost. Cost of unresolved relationships, cost of opportunities missed, cost of fans never getting proper conclusion, cost of the art that could have been their final collaboration never existing. The Supremes reunion album that never got released represents all the might-have-beens. Florence might have stayed, Mary might have been treated equally, Diana might have prioritized collaboration over control, but history is what happened, not what might have been. And what happened was separation, conflict, missed opportunities, and silence where music should be. Do you remember when the Return to Love tour was announced? Did you buy tickets hoping for magic? Drop a comment sharing memories of reunion attempts, or tell us about situations where unresolved conflict prevented collaboration that should have happened. Hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another trip down memory lane.